Nothing's happening. Nothing's happening, Ryan.
What?
Okay, transition us. Transition, Ryan.
Yep, there we are.
I knew it would work sooner or later. Wow. It's a lot
got
of
it.
nutmeg in there.
Man,
Welcome to the Nutmeg Tavern. I'm your host, John Townsend, and we're live here at the Nutmeg Tavern. Come on in, have a seat in our virtual tavern, and we're having a good time today. Hopefully the stream is working all right for you, because behind the scenes is not Aaron on the console, but Ryan.
hello.
He's trying to figure out how to make this thing work.
It feels great to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels good. Thanks,
And
guys.
in the hot seat, question seat, chat box is Kyle.
Hello.
And if you're in that chat, you might see Aaron pop in occasionally too. He's
heckle
at
me?
home. He's remote working, like some of us probably will be in the near future. But he is remote working today instead of being on the console. Who knows what the next live stream is going to look like? Let me tell you. It could be me alone in the woods. Who knows what it's going to be. But we're having a good day here, and hopefully everything's working out. Is everything working all right? They're hearing me and all that? Yes?
Looks good. Yes.
Excellent. Perfect. Glad everybody's happy with that. Before we start the topic today, the reason why I'm late is because I was trying to get this media file to work on this software, and it was... Anyway, Ryan's going to try to play this piece for us, and we're good that we're going to try that, and then we'll talk about the topic. You can do it, Ryan.
Yes, sir.
You can do it. Sir, come this way. Come this way. Ah, obviously a respectable gentleman, possibly a traveler. You don't hear any audio. Well, be you on the trail, in the camp, on the high seas. Yeah, but or possibly by your home fire, sir, you are in need of Townsend's traveling physician, in which is found only the most necessary materia medica, comprising of as few simples of the highest quality as can execute all medical intentions perfectly. The items being effective in treating bleeding, fluxes of all kinds, wounds whether green, fistulous, and oozing. What about purging mucus, expelling wind, constipations of all types, worms, gout, and jaundice, expelling stones, bitings of bad dogs, toothache, headache, stinking breath, old gleets, lifting low spirits, vertigo, and freckles too. Sir, if there is some condition or ailment that you have that isn't treatable with the items contained within this kit, it's best to reconcile yourself with your maker, as Providence is not with you. Included within this kit, 6 powerful and exotic herbals, but all these would be useless without information, wouldn't they? So, included within the Pocket Physician, Townsend's Pocket Dispensatory. Yes, knowledge of the ancients, infused with more enlightened thinking, so that you may use these herbals properly. Yes, and all this fits within this tiny tin box. Great for the pocket, the purse, or portmanteau. You need this, sir, don't you? Nope. You went away before the end. That's all right, though. There was a little kicker at the end.
Oh, that's right.
That's all right. That's all right. Ah, that was 2009, back when we made funny videos about products. And medicine's always been one of those interesting parts of 18th century research. And sometimes, a scary topic, an interesting topic, and sometimes the things come around again. These topics and these medicines kind of come around again. And the reason why I brought up this particular topic is because a medicine has come into the news stream here in the last couple of days, kind of popped up to the forefront, and I immediately said, no, wait a minute, this is something to talk about. The medicine in the news today is chloroquine, sometimes hydroxychloroquine, but guess what? This medicine that they're talking about today, a good bit, is derived from a medicine that they used in the 18th century, extremely popular So in the 18th century, actually it was sort of discovered by Western medicine in the 17th century. The Spanish that were in the South American area, they were introduced to this bark of a tree that helped treat fevers, and that idea was quickly adopted, and it was brought over to Europe. And so the Spanish were using that in Europe in the 1640s, and by the mid-1650s it started being talked about in English medicine. And in the 18th century, Peruvian bark, let's see, what are the other names for it? Jesuits bark, because Jesuits were the first missionary people to kind of have interaction with this. Jesuits tree, Peruvian bark, China bark, or cinchona bark. And then a lot of times, if you're reading in different things, it's just shortened to bark. And they would use this medicine to treat intermittent fevers. Now, they didn't know what was going on with the intermittent fevers. There were regular fevers, there were these intermittent fevers. They would keep coming and going back and forth. And so they found that they would use this on basically all kinds of fevers, but it turns out that it really was having most effect with malaria, which is that intermittent fever problem. And so we find tons and tons of references about this particular bark being used in 18th century medicine. And in some of the medical books, here's one of the medical books from the 18th century. Here's an actual 18th century copy of Quincy's Dispensatory. There are a couple of different preparations that use bark in that. And in some of these other references, this Peruvian bark is, they're saying, the most important medicine in all the pharmacopoeia. So this is, you know, they're thinking this is a great cure-all. It doesn't cure everything. They later find out as they try it with different things. They say, well, you know, it doesn't seem to work all that well on, you know, regular fevers. It doesn't work that well on these other problems, but these intermittent fevers, it's definitely doing great things for. There are some, it gets very, very popular in works in early 19th century or the late 18th century. And turns out when you make this, when you take this bark and you make like a tea out of it, an infusion, or sometimes you make a decoction of it with a kind of a cold infusion, that it would disturb people's stomachs. Because it's bitters, it's what's used in tonic water, it's quinine, all that same kind of thing. It's all derived from the same bark. So they were having trouble getting people, if they were sick to their stomach, to keep it down. And so multiple references to turning it into gingerbread. There's one, the whole book about turning it into gingerbread. And this one I thought was really fun. This one is administering Peruvian bark in fever and in other diseases, and then it's experiments to ferment the Peruvian bark with different sweets. So in here he talks about actually making it into a beer, talking about using it in the hospital. There's one wonderful page here that says, a fourth method of preparing this, I boiled a gallon of sweet wort, the first run for our making of hospital beer. And then it says a half an hour, into which, while boiling, I put the pulverized bark, 2 ounces, and continued the decoction for 10 minutes. But I thought this was great, this reference to making hospital beer. So hospitals in the time period, they had, obviously today you go to a hospital, it's got its own cafeteria. They're going to be preparing food there. In an 18th century hospital, they've got their own brewery to make sure their patients have beer. And he was making medicinal beer. It was a lot easier to keep this medicine down if it was in beer form. Or obviously this other work talked about making it into gingerbread or into little sweets, like little candies, because it's super bitter. If you've ever taken, chloroquine, which is anti-malarial, a lot of times it comes in an uncoated
pill, and it is the bitterest pill to swallow if you've ever. It's just really bad. So it's no wonder they tried to coat it with sweets and all that. It's really interesting when you dig into the reading about how much confusion there is about how it works, about whether it's actually bad for people and maybe they shouldn't be using it as much as they do, because at some points it's almost a panacea. Oh, you've got anything like a fever, you got something wrong with you, bark is what you need. We're gonna prescribe bark to you. And some doctors thought, oh, we're kind of abusing this. It isn't working so well. Not, of course, knowing exactly what they were dealing with. They were just looking at results, trying to figure out. It's like, well, we tried this thing and it works. Have no idea why. I think a lot of medicine is like that. Certainly was in the 18th century. And I have any clue about what the underlying things were. But this is just one of those very similar. Most of these medicines that they're using in the 18th century, they're pulled from the herbals in one way or another. Some sort of plant or herb, tree bark, tree leaves, tree roots, whatever. Those things are going to be used for medicines, and a lot of today's medicines are derived from those same things. Maybe we create them synthetically, but the original compound was found from all these wonderful medicinal plants. And that is also a kind of a bifurcation too, where we need to understand in the 18th century that there were these kind of cut up divisions of medicine where there were physicians who would administer medicines, and there were surgeons who were much more like butchers in the 18th century. In fact, some were just sort of graduated butchers, because butchers had a lot of experience cutting up different animals. They knew what the physiology was like, and so they would get jobs as surgeons later on. So they were very low-level kind of doctors, and then there were these physicians. They knew what was going on, and they were much more medically oriented. And then we have a lot of actual family medicine going on too, where people couldn't afford a doctor, so there were lots of recipes and whatnot for medicines in the backs of cookbooks. So it's a very interesting and kind of complex topic, even in the 18th century. That was a lot of talking.
Yeah, well, it
I'll
was
let
good.
You guys talk
it was
now.
Good talking. I've got a ton of super chat stuff to hit up real quick.
Let's do it.
Sue O'Connor, did they have family destroying board games like Monopoly or Sorry?
Risk. That's the one. Don't do it. Just
right.
Leave it in the box.
Yeah, right. And then we've got Aaron C. I'm happy to see you guys. Blob Monster.
Yeah.
What can you use nutmeg for? I can't find any recipes calling for it. Maxer Cool says, it's a beautiful thing for everyone that you guys did a broadcast today. You're making the world a better place.
Yeah,
That's really kind. Thank you. Heather Farika? Sorry if I butchered that. It says, hello from Brooklyn, New York.
Yeah.
Hello. And then Mark M. says, hi, Townsends. I rewatched the egg preservation technique video. Just as relevant today as it was in 1720. Love you all. Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate that.
Yes, thank you.
If you want to touch those, and then we'll get into some questions.
Yeah, family destroying board games, I don't know, although I think a lot of, maybe not family like adults and kids, but a lot of card games would get people kind of going, and they would do bets on those, and you would have people that were very unhappy with your fellow person who took
in our house,
from
dice games do the same thing.
Yeah.
They were doing a lot of dice stuff back then.
Yeah, exactly. Dice is...
Really ruthless.
Oh yeah, look out.
9 pins.
Flying 9 pins. Pew! If you want to find recipes for nutmeg, just open up any 18th century cookbook, and just about every other recipe or more is going to have references for nutmeg. I mean, even in your scrambled eggs, and I mean, everything. Everything's going to have nutmeg in it. You just got to look in the right cookbooks, because they used it, a lot like, even more so, but a lot like we would use vanilla today as a flavoring. Nutmeg was that flavoring of the day. Very aromatic, wonderful flavors. And somebody was referencing that doing videos. And I was thinking about the video that we put out yesterday, which had to do with, kind of looking at the 18th century and then looking at our circumstances today and, putting that into perspective. And I really want to thank everyone that shared that video because obviously it did really well. And so many wonderful comments on that. So I want to thank everyone for interacting with that and sharing that video.
Yeah, I kept coming back to that one all night long, looking at people's comments, and it was just really cool to see that. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, it's amazing to see everybody reaching out and being encouraging. And it's not only just encouraging me, but when people write those kind of comments, you're encouraging lots of other people that are reading the comments. So, and the egg preservation video, obviously, with what's going on, I don't know who's sitting on 1,000 eggs and needs to preserve them, but there are a lot of people out there that want to know about egg preservation right now, and so it's getting a lot of interest, a lot of fun interest there with egg preservation.
Somebody's in the chat called The Hobbit Homestead.
Yes. Yeah.
I've never seen that name before. I don't normally get to see the chat, but I really like your name. I just wanted to say that. All right, Kyle, what you got?
All right, well, speaking of the Hobbit Homestead, this question is from him. It says, hey, at Townsends, which remedies from the 18th century would you actually use today?
Well, I was going to preface this talk with saying, it's like, I'm not here giving medical advice, right?
We should have done that.
Yeah, it's like, this is not medical advice.
We probably had some people that were on for that portion that have dipped by now.
Yeah,
and now
it's like, well, sorry,
chew on
they're out
every
there,
bark
got their bark. Oh, and by the way, you can buy Peruvian bark today. You can go on Amazon. Probably it'll be gone by the time, if you aren't watching this live, people are going to buy it all up. But Peruvian bark is out there. You can buy it on Amazon. It's used to make your own tonic water, and tonic water is sort of like quinine water. It's a bitter water that's used in mixing drinks.
Yes, it is.
And you can make your own, and you can buy your own bark and do your 18th century medicine with Peruvian bark if you'd like, if you think you have malaria. There are a lot of things that are interesting. And the problem is that, again, they didn't have even a remote clue about what the causation was on their medicines. And so while some of them worked, and many of them worked because they were sort of a folk medicine that was adopted. And, so some doctor is going to say, well, they're using this as a folk medicine. Maybe there's something to it. I'm going to try it with my patients. And they would practice on their patients, which doctors, I guess, just plain have to do. That's how those got to be used. And it's only after the fact where you say, okay, now this works. Why does it work? Let's, get to the root of this. And so while I might be interested in some of these 18th century medicines and all the things that are in this book, it isn't very far till you dig into this book and you say, okay, if the rest of this book is as accurate as this particular piece is, then I don't want to read this book for anything but historical purposes. This book, which is used well into the 19th century, has a great section on the oil of vipers, or snake oil, if you like, and it's not poo-pooed in this book whatsoever. I don't know if there's anything to snake oil, but I doubt it. Seriously. So that's why I don't necessarily put a whole lot into them, but it certainly is interesting to see what they're saying about those and see if those things are still used in medicine today. Very, very enlightening.
What are, if any, the medicinal claims of nutmeg?
There in this particular book, I think there's a recipe for oil of nutmeg, which is, again, when they say oil of nutmeg, it's not like they squeeze nutmegs and get the oil out of it. I believe it's actually a tincture, or it's a sort of alcohol dissolved medicine. It's one of those where you pulverize it and you soak it in alcohol for, who knows, up to 3 months, right? And then you decant the alcohol off, leave the grounds behind, and it brings those other portions of nutmeg to the fore, but I don't. This particular dispensatory talks about the medicines a lot, but it doesn't say you necessarily use it for this or that. Sometimes it does, but not as much. It's not like a symptom, here's what we're going to use. It's a whole bunch. It's like it's a PDR, right? Is it PDR? Physician's desk reference. Yeah, it's more like a PDR where you just have all these drugs or medicines, and you're saying, okay, what are they?
David Donnelly fired in the super chat. Says, thanks for everything. You are a steady ship in bad seas.
Oh, thank you.
What you got, Kyle?
Can you explain how cedar was used as a medicine in North America?
In North America, a lot of these medicines, especially North American medicines, just like the bark, was originally brought to the Western medicines concept by the native population there, the Indians that were living in that area of Peru. The things like cedar bark and the spruce tree and things like that are brought into Western medicine by, again, the Native American population sort of saying, well, this is what we use for that. And there's a lot of really, really interesting information. It's a giant book on Native American medicines, how they're used in different kinds of tribes, how they're applied, used, and how some tribes used it, some tribes didn't. Sometimes it has to do with regionality, and other times it's just, different areas thought that it was useful and others didn't. So I'm not up on cedars specifically, so I don't know.
Were barbers doing surgery by then, or did that come later?
Actually, barbers are doing surgery earlier, and it starts to diverge out of the barber realm in that 18th century. So 17th century, the barber's still doing surgeries. Later on, it's like no, we're going to specialize in this. We're going to have people that just do surgeries. Again, though, surgery it's like last resort. Today, with antibiotics and all that kind of stuff, we don't nearly hesitate as much to have a doctor at least do minor surgery on it, cut it, take out a cyst or whatever it is, different little surgeries and even bigger surgeries. It's still nobody's gonna say, oh, let's just do that for fun. Okay, some people do that, but it's taken very seriously today. But in the 18th century, it's super serious. It's like, okay, this is going to kill me. And the only way for anything to happen is for me to have it cut out. The danger of gangrene and other infections setting in is just so tremendous in the 18th century that surgery per se is one of those last resort kinds of things.
Mandatory Carry came in with a super chat. Says, keep doing that voodoo that you do so well.
Thank you, Mandatory Carry.
Thank you very much. And I got one more, Kyle, and then we'll get back. It's Christine Pearson. Excuse me. Thank you for the live stream today. You're welcome.
Yes.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Thank you.
What other medicinal herbs did they use? What was commonly found in the family herb garden?
A lot of this simple cooking herbs are also end up being used as different kinds of medicines, and something like comfrey or whatever. Those are going to end up maybe that herb garden that is cooking herbs is a kind of two-for garden. It's going to have both different kinds of things in it. And a lot of the ones that show up in cookbooks are like that. They tend to be simpler things that people are going to have. They're going to trade those seeds. You're going to see things like tansy. You're going to see pennyroyal, which is not a good thing. And tansy is a poison also. Sage and those kinds of things also show up. So there's a lot of just simple herbs that we've heard of. Sometimes the flowers in our garden are going to show up as medicines too. Something like pot marigold, some of those other simple things that today we've let turn into ornamentals, and in the time period they were an important part of home medicine. So before we get on to a next question, I want to grab the Patreon names for this week. We got a lot of people that help support what we do on the channel by supporting us on Patreon, and it's one of those kind of little monthly things that people do, and it kind of sets up an automatic little tiny payment to us. And the new Patreon people this week, Lori Nikias, Matthew Johnson, Gary Hellman, Timothy Kuhn, Jack Nixon, Alan Trevina, and SMD, all brand new Patreon people. They joined the other 600 and some folks that help us out, and it's just so important for us to have this kind of base concept about, what we can budget, right, to help make what we do, make what happens around here happen. So thank you, all you Patreon folks.
Thank you guys so much. I've got some super chat. Sue O'Connor says, the first rule of getting better in the 18th century was to avoid the doctor.
Yeah, true. If you did one of those scientific studies where you said, what's the mortality if you do visit the doctor versus don't visit the doctor, not good. If you're interested in sort of medicine stuff and you want kind of an overview of what 18th century medicine was like, this particular book, The Age of Agony, excellent book. If you, down in the description section of this video, there's a Amazon store link. And if you go to the miscellaneous books on that page, this is one of the miscellaneous books that's listed on that, if you're interested in finding that. I don't think it's in print right now, so you'll probably mostly find used copies, but you can get them right there on Amazon. There's a companion book. So 18th century is the Age of Agony. The 19th century is the age of something better than agony.
something slightly better than agony.
It's like the Age of Progress or something. Oh no, Age of Miracles, I think.
The Age of Hurting just a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit less. Mostly ouchies, yeah. But this book gives you this, a real in-depth, like that idea of, learning about surgeons and how they are looked at and who became surgeons, who got to be famous surgeons. Excellent book on that, and it treats that whole medical field all through that 18th century and kind of leads you up to here's where it starts to change. So Age of Miracles is the second book of the series.
All right, Carrie Gold says, shout out to my fiance, Joe. We're huge fans.
Great.
Yeah. I hope that you love holy matrimony. AM65 sends in a donation. AJ Jackson says, uh-oh. I don't know if John's going to like this one too much.
Uh-oh.
Let's hear an 18th century joke, says A.J. Jackson. I'm just write that. You know
what? We should do a joke episode.
Okay.
Joke episode.
Yeah.
I'll try to come up with a whole raft of jokes. We can get stuff out of the...
Whole raft.
I got some ideas.
Yes.
A raft of them.
Yes,
wow.
A raft.
Man.
A raft of them.
I wonder if it'll float.
On it. Exactly.
We don't.
Abby Berg says, love historical medicine. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
And there's one more that just came in. Let me find it. Christopher Ramsey. Greetings from Glastonboro, Connecticut. Thank you for doing this and lowering my blood pressure. Please continue doing what you do. We really appreciate all these super chats and all you guys commenting. Oh, well, here's Robert Wilson. Comes in with, Mr. Townsend, are you there? Are there any interesting medicinal or colonial facts that can be traced back here to Connecticut?
Connecticut? I don't know. I don't have any particular Connecticut stories, at least specifically on medicine. So, Connecticut medicine.
And then, are we good? Can I do one more?
You can do one more.
Okay. Alexander Total. Greetings from Norway. Keep up the good work and create more great content so we have something to look at during this difficult time. You guys are a big inspiration for me and many others. Thank you so much.
Specifically on that topic, we're going to be working at more, maybe simpler, but more content for the channel, knowing that there's going to be people that need a little bit more time, to, or they're going to have more time and they're going to want to spend it watching our channel.
Right. We appreciate that so much. And then one more, Virtual Super Soldier. On the 6th day of isolation, thanks for your efforts to entertain.
6 days of isolation.
Hold strong, guys. This is not fun for anyone, but I'm so glad that you guys are making the best of it.
And if you got ideas for content, you want to see John, making a fire in the cabin and not talking, then, we'll play around. This is our chance, right? You, me, us all. This is our chance to try something new. And I'm willing to try out some interesting things. So if you got some ideas for, hey, this is the kind of video I would like, well, chat it up. We'll see what we can do.
All right, I'm going to keep on sending in super chats if you want to, but I'm going to let Kyle get through some of his questions from the comments.
Okay.
All right. Can you do an episode on teas made from wild plants and how they would be used as medicine? There's an idea for you.
Wild plants, teas, right. That's, yes. Thank you for the suggestion.
Did they use a mortar and pestle to extract oil from things, or did they have a special device?
In a small way, mortar and pestle is one of the ways you're going to do it. You're going to crush it. Triturate is one of those words they talked about in the 18th century, where they would crush things down into a powder, and then you would sometimes, just like they do today, find a solvent that you can, solve those oils out of it, and then drive the alcohol out. So you would use something like alcohol that would bring the oils out. Then you would distill the alcohol out of it, or distill the oils out of it, however way you'd separate those things and get the pure oil. Or there are things that are just pressed, and they have these there's a wonderful picture in Diderot's encyclopedia, and the guy's pressing. They make this great big press, and sometimes you see a big press and it's got a giant wooden screw, right? So they just tighten a screw and squeeze this thing down like a book press. And then other times there was one, and it's using a windlass and a bunch of pulleys on either side. So they'd have these pulleys that run on a block, and they'd squeeze the stuff between two things, and somebody would be like on a wheel, because everything's human powered in a lot of these situations. So this guy would be turning on a wheel, and it would be pulling the ropes on these pulleys and squeezing the thing to get it out. So there's a lot of different techniques that they could use, and it's amazing to see just how they did it.
What were some common non-medicinal responses to disease, like quarantining?
Well, there's the book on yellow fever, the book on smallpox, both interesting because neither one of those kinds of diseases had medicine. So they did things like say, okay, they were experimenting with inoculation. They were certainly experimenting with the idea of, okay, we have to separate these people. We have to, quarantine this thing, keep these people away. That's a smallpox thing. You can either inoculate them, or if you have a smallpox person, you want to make sure they don't come in contact with the rest of the population, because that is, the smallpox makes like scabs and sores that come off, and those are very infectious, and so you want to keep those away from anybody. And in a situation like yellow fever, they didn't know what it was. It's like, so their idea was get out of Dodge, right? It's a locality-based thing, so I'm going to run away from it. So there are both of those sorts of non-medicinal ways of treating an outbreak.
Did European or American physicians adopt any Native American medicine or techniques into their practice?
Medicine in the 18th century, and I think a lot, now, it's very global in that doctors tend to, they aren't as nationalistic as other situations. It's like the whole idea of, we're trying to heal people. This isn't all about money, hopefully, and that they're very open-handed with their information, at least to other doctors. And so the idea of adopting a medicine from a Native American population was spread internationally as well as can be expected in the 18th century. It was happening all the time. So medicines from North American say, North American, Native American populations that were adopted by doctors in North America. That idea was they would write papers and they would spread those ideas to doctors in Europe. Even when in times of war, a lot of times still medicine was crossing those borders, especially something like in the 7 Years' War, or in the Napoleonic Wars and things like that. Medicine was still crossing borders, and they were still sharing those things, saying, you know what, these two sides might be at war, but we're still sharing medical advances.
If you broke a bone, what did they do? Did they have casts back then?
The idea of making casts is, I believe, an Oriental medicinal technique that comes into the early 19th century. So in the 18th century, that's still not a thing. They're just splinting people up mostly, bandaging them up tight. That whole plaster cast idea comes into Western medicine in the early 19th century.
All right, I've got a bunch of super chats to get through real quick. And thank you guys so much for that. S.J. McGuire says, keep up the good work. Lil P, greetings from Elmira, New York.
Yeah.
Looks like my husband and I will be home for a bit to actually catch Nutmeg Tavern live. Stay safe. Colin Kelly, please share links directly to all the items you use in your video descriptions. Make it easier for us to give you money.
Whoa.
Thanks for all you do.
That'd be a lot of links.
Yeah, we tried that for a time period.
Yeah.
Keltoid 5 ... for wipes.
Yes.
And William Joseph Diedrich, or Rick, one of the two. You gents are champions for lifting everyone's spirits during the rough time. Would you kindly give a shout out to Casey and Cushion? They're not loving this quarantine.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much.
I don't think anybody is, except for, somebody who really wants to get those home projects done, right? It's like, finally, I'm locked in my house. I have to do these home projects.
Yeah, we sat down with the kids and we just started making lists of things that we could do to pass the time.
So who was the person, Casey and...
Cushion.
Casey, there you go. Yeah, I've got a bunch of projects that I would love to get to. Anyway, and I will.
Somebody suggested a video following John through a whole day. Can you imagine? Guys, you don't want to see this.
Nope. It would be like one of those high-speed...
You just don't want to see this. You'd think, they would think it was in high frame rate, and you're
right,
just...
Right, and it's just normal speed.
I feel bad for whoever has to follow you around with the camera.
Yeah. Wear them out.
Mm-hmm. What you got, Kyle?
I've got questions. All right. How were citrus fruits used as a medicine in North America?
Scurvy and what's going on with scurvy and people understanding scurvy. I mean, obviously the big thing that citrus fruits are really good for is the idea of vitamin C and how you're going to treat scurvy. And there's a lot of pluses and minuses. Again, they didn't know scurvy was related to vitamin C depletion. And so they sometimes thought it was just the acid that was the thing that was curing people of scurvy. And they would try things like vinegar because, of course, the citrus fruits, kind of naturally acidic. And, of course, citric acid, right? And ascorbic acid. It's an acid. They thought, it's like, oh, it's the acid part. It's not the vitamin C part. They didn't know exactly, how it was working, what it was working. And I'm not sure exactly when the first references to, hey, citrus fruits help with this thing. I believe it is somewhere in the mid-18th century and certainly starts to get more caught on as you go through. And by the early 19th century, they've got a clue that this is really the thing, lime juice, etc.
This is not a question, but it made me laugh. I showed my videos to showed your videos to my anxiety-ridden 14-year-old, and she said that you are like the cooking version of Bob Ross.
No, there you go. Hopefully that's a good thing for them.
Was cremation popular in the 18th century?
No, cremation wasn't. There's a lot of, number one, it takes a lot of fuel. Okay, I'll say cremation wasn't popular in North America and in Europe. I mean, it's a thing in other parts of the world. But there's still a definite religious connection with the idea of the body and the physical body and resurrection. And so, if you destroy that physical body in, burning it up, it's like, okay, what's going to happen during that time? So there's a lot of, sort of, no, that's not a good thing in the 18th century. And that's also one of the reasons why you see, and I was going to bring this up, about the idea of body snatching and the taking away the body to use it for medical experimentation. And the reason why it was difficult for doctors to get dead bodies to work on, because it's better to learn on something that isn't, a living person, but people didn't want that to happen to their dead relatives, because of course that would destroy the body or maim the body. So that there was certainly different connections and different religious thoughts to make that not so popular. And besides, I don't think there was the same issue with the idea of we don't have enough ground for this, but I'm not sure exactly what drives those different ideas at different times in history.
Real quick, Jesse McNichol sent in a donation. Thank you so much. And also, there are some folks in the chat that are wondering about, they're wondering about two things. One is our operations here, whether or not we're still going to be shipping items and that sort of thing. And somebody else is wondering why the candles in the background never flicker.
Well, they're alive, they're hot, I could burn myself on them. There's just not very much air movement in the room, so they don't flicker. But that one's flickering over there at the fireplace.
Right, well, it's roaring, that's why the candles...
Ooh, it's hot in here. Operations here at... excuse me, got some nutmeg in my throat. Operations here at Townsends continue to go on at a tempered level, let's just say, and we will continue to function even if it were in kind of full shutdown. As long as the trucks come, we'll be able to deliver product, because some people live in the building, so they can't escape from work even if they want to.
What are some good medicinal journals from that time?
Medicinal journals of that time. I was looking at one the other day, but I don't have it here at hand. There are some books that give you a little bit more of an idea of, here's the symptom, here's what I would do for it. They are terribly put together. The one I think I was reading, it's just like, you've seen that somebody sends you an email, there's not a paragraph break, and it's like 500 lines long, like you're supposed to read that, right? It's just, that's the way the book is written. It's just one huge pile of sentences, and it goes from one topic to another. I would treat this way, here's what you do. I've never seen a book like it. No index whatsoever. You have to build your own index out of this book. Wow, it's a hard book to figure out. If you want an idea about daily life and midwife, there's the Diary of Martha Ballard that's available online. And she's a midwife in the late 18th century, early 19th century. And her diary goes through and talks about, she's a midwife and she's doing some medicinal things. She's interacting with doctors at times, and it's her daily life all mixed into this diary. That's available online. So if you search Martha Ballard's diary, you'll be able to find that website. And you can also get, it's not the book printed per se as excerpts and interpretation, A Midwife's Tale. But if you want, just go right to the source material, Martha Ballard's diary. And I will look to see about some of these. Do we have We have a book. We have Every Man His Own Physician, right?
We do.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't looked at that one recently, so I don't know exactly how that one looks, but that is available on our website.
Is it difficult using historical items like tools and utensils with your left hand?
No, I've never had an issue with that. In fact, they seem to be a little bit easier. Although it's hard for me to judge. I'm a bit more ambidextrous in that, so like I use scissors right-handed, even though I write left-handed. So I'm sort of,
John can come to my computer and use the mouse with his right hand, and I go to his computer. I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing here.
The shipping computer's mouse is always on the left side. But it took a minute for me because I'm right-handed to figure it out. But this one says, I love the new cabin. I've been enjoying your videos for years, but I always feel bad seeing John sit on the ground of the fireplace. What kind of furniture plans do you have for the cabin?
some of the most primitive cabins, you'll read about it in backwoods of Canada. They didn't have much for furniture at all. Sometimes, you know, almost like a pile of leaves in the corner to sleep on with a blanket on top of it and blocks of wood to seat yourself.
This time of year, that is the best seat in the house. John probably wishes that he could sit inside the fireplace.
Right. So, I mean, it might look uncomfortable to you and kind of weird sitting in the fireplace of the cabin, but it's not uncommon at all, especially in the big fireplaces. And that's not a very big fireplace per 18th century terms. No. Many fireplaces that were basically the whole end of the room was a fireplace. And sometimes it's almost its own little brick room. And they even had fireplace seats that were built into it. You might not have a giant roaring fire, but a smaller fire, and you would want to stay warm. You would actually get into the fireplace to get warm. So I'm not uncomfortable at all, except that I'm cold on one side and hot on the other. That's about the most uncomfortable thing about it.
So Nick Molnar sent in a super chat that said, "Hope all is well. Cheers from Ontario, Canada." And Joe Serrano says, "Thanks, John, for all you do. Sending you $2. Woo. Maybe tell us an 18th century joke on expelling winds."
They had a lot of expelling wind issues, and nutmeg is good for that.
I think it's funny that every time you look through a cookbook in the back where the medicinal stuff is, there's relief for that.
Yes,
every time.
It's a large concern for those folks, as it probably is today.
I have one last question. This one says, bricks used to build the Bowen Campbell house came from Lexington, Kentucky. What part of brick making was so expensive that it justified importing bricks from 100 miles away instead of making them on site?
That's a super good question, and the only answer I've got is that there might not be decent clay close by. I can't believe that. So I don't have a clue.
They wouldn't have been that particular on color of brick. I mean, that's another.
Well, they weren't glazed, were they?
I don't think so. But still, just a different color of earth. But that's weird. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't have a clue except for, they got a deal, or, I mean, does the river run that direction? Is it, something you could put them on a boat and float it right down the river?
Lexington is not close to the Ohio. I mean, there might be a smaller river that runs through there,
but then you got to get down to Tennessee? That doesn't make any sense at all. No, I don't have a clue why anybody would haul bricks that far in that time period. It doesn't make any sense at all. A lot of the bricks around here, if you go to an old farmhouse around here, the old farmhouse that I lived in when I grew up, it had bricks that were made on site. They were just they were bad, cheap, 19th century, fired out of the clay that's just right there, right here in this particular area, and right out by the cabin. The clay there would make great bricks. It's full of sulfur, so it burns and it's stinky, but once it's made of brick, it's a brick. Usually a lot of buildings, if they're brick buildings, could be made with the very soil that's right there in the ground. So you dig out the clay, you'd make it into bricks, fire it in a clamp oven. So you basically make the kiln to fire the bricks out of the bricks themselves, and then you take it apart and build your building. Wow.
I wish I had some more. I'm just like, I can't. That's bugging me that I don't have an answer for that question. I can't even think of
That would be a question for the folks down at the Bowen Campbell House.
Yeah.
We have had a tremendous week. This has been a tremendous live stream. So much great content. Again, it's like you go digging and it's just amazing information that you dig up, and it relates to what we do every day, gives us this just incredible foundation to build upon, understanding how much people could do in the 18th century, did do in the 18th century, how much life that we have depends on what people did in the 18th century, what they discovered, their labors, their, everything about that. So I always find studying the 18th century just incredibly fascinating. I want to thank you for coming along on this journey as we discover these things and kind of import these concepts into our lives and understand where these things come from. So thank you so much today. Thank you guys for helping me out in the live stream. Everyone on Patreon, the wonderful super chat folks, the people that comment and share our videos, you guys are incredible. Thank you for everything you do. Have a wonderful weekend.